ground attack. It follows intensified airstrikes on targets in Lebanon. We see the efforts to find some of those trapped in the rubble. And the people so fearful of the coming storm that they want to escape to Syria, gathering at the border in their thousands.
Also on Sky News at 10 tonight, the tears of the victims of another apparent post office scandal after an official report finds they too may have been failed by a faulty computer system. A double dousing of the flames of Britain's industrial heritage as a major steelworks and coal-fired power are consigned to history. And a smiling Prince Harry is back in Britain, but as he honours the bravest of children, whether he'll see his own family in the UK is still unknown. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Good evening from Beirut, not much more than 60 miles to the south of here. What Israel's defense minister today called the next phase of its war against Hezbollah appears to be underway tonight. Heavy artillery fire is being reported in border towns. Israel has declared a closed military zone, and United Nations troops in the area are not able to patrol. It follows more devastating airstrikes, including for the first time here in the center of Beirut, with a target, a Palestinian militant group. Hezbollah itself today said it was ready for a ground invasion. Well, tonight, Lebanese media have reported heavy shelling in the towns of Wazani and Qiyam on the southern border with Israel. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford has the latest on this developing situation and the human impact of Israel's military assault.
The Israeli forces have been massing on Lebanon's southern border for days, pointing to an ever closer ground incursion. And the defense minister gave one of the clearest hints yet when he visited his troops hours before.
This is your mission. We will employ all that is needed. Your forces, other forces, from the air, from the sea, and also from the land.
According to US media, Israeli special forces are already inside Lebanon carrying out reconnaissance raids. Explosions have been seen in southern Lebanon. And as more Israeli troops were spotted on the border, the IDF declared 3 villages a military zone, another sign that troops may be on the move or about to be. In the first Hezbollah speech since the killing of their leader, the militant group signalled they're ready for any ground battle.
We're prepared if the Israelis decide to enter by land. The resistance forces are ready for a ground engagement.
The lead up to this point has been bloody and violent. We watched rescue workers searching for survivors hours earlier where 2 residential blocks once stood. There have already been some remarkable tales of survival. The rescuers took 4 hours to bring out this man from under the rubble. Many of those trapped were found when their shouts were heard. This young man, his face bloodied, live-streamed his cries for help. My brother and I are trapped, he's saying. I don't know where my mother and father are. He and his brother somehow survived. His parents didn't, along with more than 40 others in the single most deadly Israeli attack so far. That sound is the first apartment block coming down after residents say they heard 3 Israeli airstrikes. You're about to see the adjacent second block collapse. Both were filled with families who'd already fled the bombings further south. The Israeli forces say their attacks are dismantling Hezbollah's infrastructure. It's viewed very differently by Lebanese people on the receiving end. This is a literal massacre, this civil defense rescuer tells us. He spent all night pulling people out, including the young man in the video. I've never seen anything like it, he goes on. This is a war crime. For the first time this year, the Israeli forces hit central Beirut rather than its southern suburbs. Another escalation. 3 leaders of a Palestinian faction in Lebanon were killed. The Israeli attacks are widening in scope. The strike in the capital is on top of repeated attacks down south and in the east of the country. Among those killed, the IDF said, was Lebanon's Hamas leader, who worked for the UN refugee agency, UNRWA. The number of dead from Israeli attacks in less than a fortnight looks set to eclipse the 34 days of war in 2006.
Whatever the intended targets of these airstrikes, they are coming at enormous human costs.
And to the Lebanese people across the country, the Israeli tactics and their consequences are making them feel this is rapidly turning into another Gaza. 19-year-old Zainab has a broken leg, hip and shoulder. She doesn't know yet that most of her family are dead. Her body's broken, but her spirit is strong.
The Israelis targeting that building only means they want to scare us. They target civilians. But you should know we're not afraid. They can't scare us. And even if they try to kill us and maim us, we'll keep fighting.
And Western countries, unable to broker an end to this, are drawing mounting criticism.
All what we want is to stop supplying Israeli arms and Israeli defense forces. And as you see, this is the result. This is the result of the supplies.
Multiple entire families are being killed, 7 members in this one family alone. There's an overwhelming grief in Lebanon right now, as well as a growing humanitarian crisis, and the fear that this is going to get even worse. Alex Crawford, Sky News, in Sidon, in southern Lebanon.
Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to our International Affairs Editor, Dominic Waghorn, who's in Washington for us. But first, let's go straight to our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes, who joins us from northern Israel tonight. And Deborah, we were hearing the artillery fire, the heavy artillery fire there in northern Israel. Just tell us what you're seeing and hearing.
Well, we've been here for the last hour. We're just a few miles away from the border with Lebanon. Israeli forces have been mobilising around here, prepared for a possible ground incursion if it hasn't already started. And since we've been here, you can just hear that now, we have heard the steady beat of outgoing artillery fire, rocket fire. And then every now and again, you can see that Lebanon is far behind me over the hills in the distance, but you can see the orange flash of the impacts when they land. We've also heard drones overhead. You can see that's another outgoing round. It is the sounds of war and very much the sort of sounds that you would expect for an army that is preparing or has maybe already started some kind of ground incursion. Clearly, they seem to be aiming at targets on the ground, maybe trying to create the ability for troops to be able to move on the ground. We know that tanks are in the area. We know that ground troops are being prepared for a possible incursion. We don't know the scale of that yet, but clearly in the next few hours and days it will become more evident.
Deborah, we'll keep you right there. I'm just going to go straight to Washington and speak to Dominic Waghorn. Dom, I mean, this situation is moving rapidly, very quickly. Every single day seems to have brought something new, and the Americans, no doubt, incredibly alarmed tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a dark and very ominous day for the Middle East, but also an extraordinary day in Israeli-American relations. It does seem to be plumbing new depths in that very strained relationship. A hair started running when the State Department said that they had been told by the Israelis that they were conducting operations in Lebanon. It wasn't clear whether that was actually talking about it happening now and then, or whether that was they felt that this was the plan of the Israelis. So the American president was then asked about that directly. Take you to the Oval Office this morning, and the president was asked, was he aware about the possibility of a ground invasion? Have a listen to what he says, but also how he says it.
Israel may be now launching a limited operation into Lebanon. Are you aware of that? Are you comfortable with their plans?
I'm more aware than you might know, and I'm comfortable with them stopping. We should have a ceasefire now.
So clearly, Joe Biden was, I think, frustrated with the way he was asked that question. Of course, he would know about what's going on in the Middle East, but also his response was very testy because he clearly is frustrated by the direction of travel for events in the region. And clearly, this is an extraordinary moment. The American president is saying to Israel that he wants them to stop and halt plans for a ground invasion of Lebanon. He wants them to agree to a ceasefire. And it seems from what we're seeing, what we're hearing on the northern border, and what we're hearing from numerous reports now, the Israelis are directly rejecting that and disregarding it. And that is an extraordinary moment in American-Israeli relations for a president who has been a staunch supporter of Israel all his political career, who has committed America to billions more aid during this war against Hamas, and has come under considerable political fallout and criticism for it. Branded as genocide Joe by his critics. He's paid a political price for that, but he stood by Israel, and this now seems to be Israel's response to that, ignoring his pleas for them to halt this ground invasion, which does seem to be now going ahead this evening from most of the reports we're hearing in the region.
Dom, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. But let's go straight back to our Deborah Haynes, who joins us from northern Israel now. And Deborah, the aerial bombardment campaign continues here. I can hear it just in southern Beirut behind me. But of course, where you are, you can also hear and see a lot of outgoing artillery fire.
Yes, and in the last couple of minutes since we last spoke, we heard a huge outgoing round, and then we saw an orange flash just behind me, over in the distance, and you can maybe hear that boom there. You could see some white smoke moving into the sky. Clearly, there's some kind of target that they are trying to hit far off in the distance. We can also hear an aircraft overhead, maybe some kind of plane that's trying to help locate targets for the artillery to strike. It's all the indications that you would expect to see if there is going to be some kind of ground operation. And for people in this area, there you can hear another outgoing round. For people living in this area that have been under Hezbollah rocket fire for the last year, this operation can't come soon enough. We were speaking to people in a town nearby that have been under rocket attack, and they are applauding Israel's operation. Yes, they know it could mean that there's going to be retaliatory strikes in this direction, but they say that it's the only way they believe that security can be restored to this country almost exactly 1 year on from the October the 7th attacks in the south, where Israel's defences were fundamentally undermined. And I think everything that you're seeing from then is Israel trying to restore deterrence.
Deborah, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there from northern Israel, and we can hear that outgoing artillery, heavy artillery fire into border towns, into southern Lebanon. Well, the fear of Israel's ground offensive and the airstrikes has caused the Lebanese government, they say, around 1 million people to be displaced from their homes. Some have moved north away from Israel. Others are moving east. Many are attempting to cross into Syria, saying it is less risky than staying in Lebanon, which is quite extraordinary given Syria is a war zone. Sky's international correspondent John Sparks travelled to Al-Masna border crossing, where he sent us this report.
Few people in Lebanon would choose to make this trip. The Syrian border is something to avoid. Yet 100,000 have made the crossing, and many more will try, each one an act of desperation.
Aren't you taking a risk by going back to Syria?
I have to take a risk. What am I supposed to do? I need to escape the war.
Yeah, we're scared, but we just rescued our friend from the rubble.
This is Masna, a dusty frontier town now consumed by a great wave of humanity. The majority are Syrians who've decided to gamble on a trip back home. Adnan had just arrived from southern Lebanon.
Down there, they're bombing civilians. They say it's Hezbollah, but that's not true. Everything belongs to civilians. They're trying to forcibly displace people.
The fact that so many people here think that Syria is safer now than Lebanon, what does that say to you?
Yes, of course. They're hitting everything. They've gone from one place to another as they bomb. There's not a single place in Lebanon that hasn't been hit.
These are extraordinary scenes, a remarkable exodus underway. Many people here fled for their lives during the Syrian civil war. Now they're returning because they think Syria is a better bet. They think it's a safer place to be than Lebanon. And you can see and you can feel the urgency. Nobody's hanging around.
Many have never visited their homeland before. They've spent their lives as refugees. Others are angry. The Israeli bombardment has forced 1 million people from their homes.
They came to us, they occupied us, and they want to impose themselves on us. Hassan Nasrallah was martyred. I hope there'll be 2,000 more Hassans.
More than 1 million Syrians have sought sanctuary in Lebanon, the majority living in squalid camps like this. Many residents won't go back, afraid of what the Syrian regime would do. But at the border crossing, an elderly couple told us they'd take their chances.
Even Syria is not safe. But where are we supposed to go? Where are we going? We just don't know. But we take this road, and the rest is up to God.
After days of airstrikes, civilians are going to extremes in a desperate effort to protect themselves. Thousands more will follow as the Israelis intensify their campaign. John Sparks, Sky News, on the Lebanese-Syrian border.
Well, you can already see the humanitarian crisis as a result of a week-long bombardment campaign by Israel. 1 million people on the move from the south, the east, and other parts of this country, trying to move north, trying to get away from the bombardment. Tonight, Israel issued another warning to citizens of southern Beirut, and they told them to move out of their homes, move out of the area, because those neighborhoods would continue to be targeted. I think we can show you some of those blasts that took place in the last few minutes, where we heard just behind us the bombardment of southern Beirut taking place there. So that was just behind me here. And we have seen a very similar campaign over the course of the last few days. Israel has issued a number of warnings asking people to leave. We've also heard just one statement from the IDF tonight, the Israel Defense Forces. Their spokesperson came out and said, please refrain from reporting on this, from spreading false rumors, because we're worried about the safety of our troops. They have not confirmed that this ground incursion has begun, although I did speak to many ministers here and the economy minister, who has told me that they are getting reports that this ground incursion has already begun. We did see that artillery fire from northern Israel into southern Lebanon. Lebanese media also reporting that. We will continue to follow all of the developments here from Beirut, from Israel and the wider region, as the implications of this ground incursion become clearer, as well as obviously the human toll as well. But for now, Anna, back to you in the studio.
Yalda, thank you. Now, Alan Bates became the face of the first post office computer scandal. Could Steve Marston play a similar role for a second? He is one of these sub-postmasters who believed he had been failed by the post office's capture computer system in the 1990s. Well, today, an official report found a reasonable likelihood that it, too, like the Horizon system, created shortfalls in some of their accounts. Steve and his wife watched the delivery of the report from home, as our business correspondent Adele Robinson reports.
This meeting is about the scandal before the scandal. And this is the moment Steve and his wife have been waiting for. Confirmation the capture accounting software he used as a sub-postmaster in the 90s may have been responsible for shortfalls he was prosecuted for. An independent report found there was a reasonable likelihood that capture could have created them.
After nearly 30 years of thinking that I was the one to blame, that the software, the computer was perfect, I just feel totally emotional, totally overwhelmed. It's just been horrific for my wife. Both Jan and myself, we've been having a lot of therapy over the years. But it's always there, it's always there. It's always in the background.
Capture was the predecessor to the faulty Horizon computer system, which saw hundreds wrongfully convicted. The report made no conclusions on the safety of capture convictions, but it paves the way for exoneration.
We've got to have exonerations of these individuals, and we've got to also have a compensation scheme for the individuals. The problem is the post office still dragging their feet on information, and we don't know exactly how many people are affected by this. I think the government have got to press the post office now very hard to reveal all the information they've got on the capture system.
It was all part of the post office scandal, and it set the scene, if you like, for aggressive prosecutions and an inability to accept that the computer could be wrong.
Despite asking, the government didn't respond to our request for a comment, but the Post Office say they're sorry for past failings and determined that wrongs must be put right. Victims, however, have waited 30 years already, and they want speedy action.
I'm 68. I'm not going to be here forever. I want this to be done as quickly as possible, not just for me, but for everybody else, plus posthumous pardons as well for those that are sadly no longer here. I think they deserve, because they went to meet their maker with this still hanging over them, you know, being seen as thieves when they weren't.
Adele Robinson, Sky News.
The BBC revealed today that it had upheld complaints by the actress Amanda Abbington against her dancing partner in the programme Strictly Come Dancing. She had not suffered physical aggression, it found, but had suffered verbal bullying and harassment. She said the result was a vindication, as our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports.
Dancing the salsa, Amanda Abbington and Giovanni Panici.
When Amanda Abbington dramatically quit Strictly Come Dancing, the scandal saw her subjected to vile rape and death threats. Giovanni Panici had vehemently denied her claims that he was unnecessarily abusive, cruel and mean in rehearsals. After half a year, a BBC inquiry concluding that while complaints of verbal bullying and harassment were upheld, claims of physical aggression were not.
But the BBC has apologised to the actress, admitting that while at the time the production team took steps to address the issues as they understood them, ultimately what they did back then wasn't enough.
Abbington responding that despite this vile abuse, I've never regretted coming forward. This apology means a great deal to me, so too does the fact that the BBC have acknowledged the steps that were put in place to support and protect me and past contestants were not enough. Panici, who's currently appearing in the Italian version of the show, has said he's pleased that this 6-month review has not found any evidence of threatening or abusive behaviour and relieved that the overwhelming majority of allegations have not been upheld. Since the show's return, a subtle part of the narrative has been the sympathetic conversations between dancers checking in on their celebrity partners. But lessons still to be learned, according to former Strictly Come Dancing professional Christina Rianoff.
Duty of care is something the BBC sort of talks about a lot because it's had errors.
Talk a lot.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, as much as the BBC talks about duty of care, you clearly could see this coming then, couldn't you? It has been
I just don't think it was what it really needed to be. I've done other TV shows. The first thing you get is the evaluation by a psychiatrist. And I think Strictly has to have the same.
You count Giovanni as a friend. Do you worry about what the impact of this is having on his mental health?
I do, because I know it can be very difficult for anyone going through so much pressure in the press. People think we're just some sort of machines, you know, we're not humans.
While changes may now be in place, BBC management will be hoping this is at least one crisis they can put to bed. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
The second day of the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham felt more like a beauty pageant of sorts as candidates for the party leadership paraded their credentials. Frontrunner Robert Jenrick attempted to appeal to the right of the party with a commitment to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. But there were warnings from more moderate voices within the party that none of the candidates adequately represent true Tory values. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, has more.
Tory party conference, but not as you've come to know it. This year out of power and in need of a new leader. This man, the front runner with MPs, knows powdered, no notes, match fit.
Churchill, friends, would turn in his grave if he saw what had happened to this document today.
Touching on Brexit-style battles about taking direction from European courts, Robert Jenrick clear Britain must leave the European Convention on Human Rights to take back control of immigration.
It's leave or die for our party. Let's leave the ECHR and let's get this done. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
You just said in there, if the party doesn't leave the European Convention of Human Rights, it will die. Is that not a little bit excessive? You're saying it's existential for the Conservative Party.
Look, I think a party of the centre-right has to have an answer to these issues. And if we don't take a stand on fixing illegal migration, restoring sovereignty to our people and our parliament, there isn't a future for the Conservative Party
What
on these
about
issues.
the country, though? I mean,
well, this is about this. No, I'm not. Beth, nothing. It's with no, I'm not. With
the
great.
country aren't sitting there going, "We need to leave the ECHR."
Well, with great respect, Beth, I think millions of people across our country would have been very concerned to hear what I just said.
As this conference gets underway, generic building momentum as MP groupings on the party's right come out in support. Kemi Badenoch, his closest rival.
We need to be able to speak confidently about conservatism.
Trying to get back on track after controversy over her remarks on maternity pay yesterday. Some of your opponents say you cut through in the wrong way and it might turn off voters. What's your response to that?
Well, I think that I cut through in a positive way. And the fact that I'm sparking debates shows that I'm leading the debate in this contest. People are talking about what I'm talking about. If you're not saying anything, then you're not going to cut through at all.
But this former cabinet minister concerned about what the candidates aren't talking about.
Well, I'm not hearing enough about the issues that matter to the British people.
You said yesterday that you thought that banging on about the ECHR made the party look weird.
Yeah, it's weird. That's not where the public are. They're not sitting in the dog and duck worrying about Article 14 of the ECHR.
If you were hoping for this conference to speak to those who aren't Tory card carriers, look away now. This beauty parade is all about the party. The public will have to wait. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Birmingham.
Now, it's been a significant day in the transition away from a reliance on fossil fuels towards a greener economy and future. 142 years of coal-powered electricity production was consigned to history when the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station was desynced from the national grid. At the same time, the final workers were finishing their shifts as the Port Talbot Steelworks shut its gates. Union leaders and local businesses have questioned whether the closures have come too soon, as Sky's Dan Whitehead reports.
The last smoke and steam rises into the sky above Blast Furnace 4. It's the only visible sign that steel making in South Wales has come to an end after more than 100 years. Manning the furnace for the very last time is Stuart Phillips.
I've been here for 27 years now. It's all I've really known, the same as many of my colleagues. So, it's sad times. It's today is a day in history, really, in Port Talbot.
The closure means more than 2,000 job losses. Some workers will stay at the plant. Processing will continue, as will construction of a new electric arc furnace at a cost of £1.25 billion. But the electric arc furnace won't be up and running for another 4 years. That's a long time for people not to be earning and spending money in a town which relies on these jobs. In the shadow of the steelworks, the Docks Cafe has been serving meals to shift workers for years, but they fear that it could now close.
Well, normally our cafe's full on a dinner time where we got all the contractors or Tata employees in. But as you can see today, there's still one customer in the cafe.
The final steel production in Port Talbot comes on the same day the UK stops producing electricity from burning coal. The closure of the power plant in Ratcliffe-on-Soar brings an end to our country's 142-year reliance on burning fossil fuels for electricity. Another step towards a greener industry, but unions fear it's happening too quickly.
We know we've got to go green. We've got the offshore wind farms that are going to be built off the South Wales coast. That's years away. Again, why are they shutting a coal site when there's nothing to replace it at the moment? It just seems madness.
For Port Talbot, it is a time to adjust as many search for new jobs. A town built on steel could no longer make it. Dan Whitehead, Sky News in Port Talbot, South Wales.
The country's top civil servant has announced he will be standing down from the job by the end of the year. Cabinet Secretary Simon Case sent a letter to colleagues saying he had been undergoing treatment for a neurological condition for the past 18 months. He also added his decision was solely for health reasons and not for anything else. Members of the National Education Union have voted to accept the government's 5.5% pay rise for teachers in England, but the union also warned teachers' pay in England remains significantly lower than in Scotland, which is unsustainable in the long term. Communities across the southern United States are still without food, water and electricity following the devastating impact of Hurricane Helene. President Joe Biden has said he will visit some of the affected areas later this week after confirming more than 100 people were killed, while 600 remain unaccounted for. Prince Harry returned to the UK to attend the annual Well Child Awards in London this evening. It's an event he was supported for more than a decade, but whilst his appearance was welcome amongst the children he was there to support, it also raised the usual questions over whether the trip would include a reunion with his family. Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills reports.
Back in the UK and back to what he's always done best. 5 years ago, Harry first met Noah.
Don't apologise, I love it.
And now he's got his own experience as a dad.
My daughter Lily's got these lollies, and she's got the favourite one. Yes.
For 16 years, he's been patron of the Well Child Awards. With no prize for Harry, Scarlett Cripps, who's had 2 major brain operations, gave him 4 glass hearts for him, Meghan, Archie and Lilibet.
I gave him a little bag of 4 hearts and a little note, and whenever he's feeling low or he's having a bad day, he can just squeeze the heart and it will make him feel happy.
His happy place now is, of course, America, but this is one event that keeps him coming back.
The Well Child Awards is an event that never fails to inspire me. The young people I meet are always smiling, and in every room they walk into, seemingly lights up with warmth and positivity. So, keep being you. You've got this, and we've got you.
A trip to London always brings questions. His team won't say how long he's staying for or whether he's going to see his family. As for Harry, in this moment, this was the only thing that really mattered. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Well, clearly keeping a very close eye on what is happening in Lebanon. We've just seen another huge blast in Beirut. Take a look. Well, certainly earlier the Israeli military had told people in 3 areas of the southern